Now, I want to go, before too much time passes, to this next slide by the General Douglas MacArthur.
The nations of the world will have to unite, for the next war will be an interplanetary war. The nations of Earth must someday make a common front against attack by people from other planets. General Douglas MacArthur.
That was 1955, October. I was 3 or 4 months old. And they already had this plan for a false flag or a false INW threat from outer space that Werner von Braun later spoke of. And now let's listen to Ronald Reagan at the United Nations.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
Yes. The only way we can live together in peace is that if we're at war with someone else. I mean, this is, of course, batshit crazy, but we have something here that is what is called an acculturation process, where over many decades there have been leaders that have been convinced that we have a threat and that the solution to that threat or incursion from other civilizations is to militarize the relationship. Now, interestingly, the same people who benefit from, say, hoaxing the Gulf of Tonkin event in Vietnam, which stampeded President Johnson into escalating Vietnam into the quagmire it became, that cost trillions of dollars and hundreds of millions of lives, if you count Vietnamese and Southeast Asians as living humans, which they are, or the famous weapons of mass destruction that Saddam Hussein had, which were to justify us going into Iraq, which gave us ISIS. It's all hoaxed. And so you have people who are continuously creating hoax scenarios. And this has actually got a very military-sounding bureaucratic term, and it's called a deceptive indication and warning, or a false INW. And that's what the pop culture would call a false flag. And these are concocted in their research projects all the time, and they're put on a storyboard years, and sometimes decades in advance. And the big one is the alien invasion one. And so through the UFO subculture, Hollywood, the media, and the internet, there has been a very well-funded and clever disinformation and counterintelligence operation that was launched in the 50s to convince people of what you just heard General Douglas MacArthur and Ronald Reagan decades later say was necessary. So then the question, you have to then take everything you've ever read and everything you've ever seen and go, was it real or was it Memorex, as they used to say in the commercials? Is it real or was it something that was made up for its psychological warfare value? And I'm quoting from a CIA document from 1953. To what extent have we been deceived? And so I think this is why we have to be brutally honest with ourselves. And I have had contact with ETs, and I have also been targeted with what he's describing, both, and I know the difference. And I can tell you that it's quite clear the difference. And the electromagnetic weapon systems that can induce an abduction state, and then the things they can do are truly terrifying. And the same thing with the mutilations. Dr. John Altshuler, who was a hematologist, pathologist in Denver, who was the original Snippy the horse investigator back in the late 60s in Colorado, is a very good friend of mine. And he concluded that those were 100% being done by paramilitary human groups made to look alien because they would frighten people, but they were also getting raw materials for their program life form labs that were in underground bases out there. And they were getting cell types and cells with high mitotic indices and things of that sort, or the tongue and the rectum and the genitals and what have you, because they reproduce quickly. But they would masquerade it as a UFO doing it. And he figured that out long ago. And then all of a sudden in the UFO subculture, An alien harvest. Well, no. Actually, it's a paramilitary harvest, and we know exactly what they're doing with these body parts, and we know why they're doing it, and they're very happy for people to think it was ET. That's how counterintelligence works. So if you want to study this issue, you cannot leave out, you can't just take anything at its face value. You have to question what part of it is real, what part of it is hoaxed, and why would they want people to think that there's a threat? What Reagan said, what General MacArthur said. Because, let's get back and follow on with what Paul Hellyer was sharing. How do you justify trillions of dollars in expenditures unless you have a bigger and more powerful enemy? You know, Leon Panetta, the CIA director for Obama for a period, and I provided a briefing to him, and he said publicly, we're spending $110 billion a year chasing about 70 Al-Qaeda people in Afghanistan. He literally admitted 70. So in order for Halliburton to get their $150 a gallon for a jug of water, no bid contracts, you got to have this war going on. Cheney's old company, Halliburton. So this is all contrived, but the big one's coming. You ain't seen nothing yet, friends. If you think Vietnam was a disaster, or the Iraq War and ISIS and Afghanistan's a disaster, you just stay asleep and let this other one come rolling out over the public. So we have got to wake up and realize when we're being played and when we're being deceived and say, no, we're going to opt for universal peace. And we're going to opt for a new civilization, free energy, peaceful contact with these civilizations, the ending of these cabals, and the ending of the stranglehold that the gangbangsters have on this planet. By the way, the reason the secrecy is so entrenched, if you acknowledge that a UFO is real, man-made or ET, the first question is going to be, how is it operating? When that's asked, it will be answered, because we have the answers. When that's answered, it's goodbye oil, petrodollar, your public utilities, hydropower, solar, nuclear power, internal combustion engines in your car, jet engines, rockets, all of it, bang. Obsolete. And we're talking hundreds of trillions of dollars in commodities that are traded on the Chicago Board of Trade, just in the commodities futures derivatives. That would be obsolete. You wouldn't need coal, you don't need oil. So you can't have this subject come out without it also bringing out the sciences and technologies behind it, which is why they're desperate to keep it secret and to scare people with it and create all kinds of false flag things. And people say, when is the false flag event going to happen? I said, it happened. It's been happening since the 50s. We're 60 years into a false flag operation. This is why we have to do disclosure. We have to do it now. We have to create teams to make peaceful contact that are non-militaristic with these civilizations. We must bring out these technologies to save the Earth's environment, and we have to liberate humanity from the gangbangsters. That's what has to happen. It's a very tall order, and we need every single hand on deck to do it, and I hope you will join us in doing so. Now we're going to take a few questions, yeah? I didn't know we were going to do Q&A. If you had the ability, do it. I think we have till 3:30. Yeah, about 15 minutes. So if people have any questions?
Okay, what we're going to do is, we just have 15 minutes. One question, okay? Myself and one of the volunteers over there will get you a mic, and we'll do the best we can. One question only, okay? I'll start.
Yeah, and just a question, not a soliloquy.
Right, okay, please.
Hello, thank you very, very much for being here. So something like the Corey Good stuff that we're all hearing about, the galactic wars that are going on, those are all false flag? Those are people that have been convinced that they're doing this? And
yes, I mean, well, we have to understand there are witting and unwitting people in this.
Yeah.
Okay, so The quick answer is, without talking about personalities, I really don't care. I like to talk about ideas and not people. There is great value in presenting this Manichaean us versus them cosmic view. All right, this is the cosmic Expo, right? So the truth is, many people have been in classified projects and been given experiences through these electronic systems that interface with consciousness that are absolutely real to them. Now, I remember in 1994 meeting with a man that in the 50s had invented an electronic system that you could wear so that you would be able to remote view in consciousness any place. But they also had turned it into a weapon system where they could give someone a consciousness experience of anything they wanted. And, hello? We lost power here. And give any experience they wanted. And the man I'm quoting here is a genius electronics engineer who was in his 80s and wanted to give this system to me. I didn't want to touch it. And he said, basically, if we want you to have a personal conversation with your personal God, Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, whoever, you will have it. You will believe it's real. You will pass a lie detector test that it is real. And that's how good it is. Werner von Braun on his deathbed, in addition to warning about the hoaxing of an alien attack, actually said the only thing more frightening than that scenario and that plan is the electronic warfare systems that interface with thought and consciousness that can hoax experiences for people and that have been abused in this way. So what I'm saying is I'm not going to ascribe intent to anyone. I think a lot of this is very innocent. But I can say that there are people who are either witting or unwittingly purveyors of a narrative of conflict which is simply not there and for which there's not a scintilla of objective evidence. The other point is that one of the problems is and I know I'm going to sound boring here, nobody knows science. So, my uncle was Grumman, Northrop Grumman, and designed the lunar module. I mean, we're a science family, and I go, yeah, but people don't even understand how this thing works. They just want to know they can push a button and make something happen. But when you start talking about interstellar and intergalactic technologies, the idea that there would be wars, I mean, it's great for Star Wars, and it's great for George Lucas. He's made billions and billions of dollars on it. But the truth is, if you weaponize technologies that are 1 million years more advanced than our hydrogen bombs, you're going to detonate that sucker once on each side and everyone's gone. Your planet is turned into a pink mist floating through the cosmos. So the idea that there's going to be this sort of like cowboys and Indians doing this business, it's only because people don't understand what the science and technologies are behind transdimensional interstellar travel. And so, it makes for a sexy narrative. It is great because it can scare the hell out of people. Makes no sense. Any more than mutual assured destruction makes any sense. Like Paul was talking about people in the Pentagon, let's get into a thermonuclear war with Russia. Well, the thousands of thermonuclear weapons that are thousands of times more powerful than Hiroshima, you're not going to survive that. The whole planet wouldn't. So, and those are technologies from the 40s and 50s. We're talking about technologies that are hundreds of thousands or millions of years more developed. So I think we have to look at how does life evolve in the universe? And we're going to talk about this a lot tomorrow in the workshop that I'm going to do here from 3 until 7, is that there is a morphogenic field propagation, but there's a selective process. That if you reach a certain point and you don't make it to what Michikaku calls a level 1 civilization that's peaceful and living in harmony with its environment, and not destroying its planet, you don't make it any further. So we're a level 0 civilization. To get to a level 1, which is the minimum we have to get to survive this current period of time, we have to become peaceful on Earth and peaceful in space, and we have to bring out the technologies, and we have to end the era of endless war. It's required. And other civilizations have come this way before us. And if they don't get that right, they terminate. They destroy themselves. So this is what I call the selection of non-hostility in interstellar civilizations that is built into the system. of the speed of light barrier. Because if you go beyond the speed of light and you still have this consciousness of violence, you're not going to survive very long because of the nature of that kind of technology being weaponized.
There's a
Next
question on the other side there,
Yes.
I think.
Hi, Stephen, and thank you so much for this presentation. Sort of a dual question. What is the difference between, or how do you tell the difference between a man-made alien and a real alien, and a man-made craft and a real craft?
Good question. Sometimes you can't because the man-made ones have gotten very good, but at a close proximity, if you can see superstructure, meaning the airform, the ET objects are seamless and they have no visible parts. The man-made ones do have visible parts, like if you look at a Boeing, you'll see where the rivets are, and you'll see, and they are made, and I'll get into this tomorrow about what trans-dimensional manufacturing is, how you create a kind of an infra-ultrasonic energy field that's in this dimension just beyond linear space-time and materialize objects in totality out of not digging up ore and digging up metal and cobbling it together, but materializing it. Okay, and that's how they're craft, and that's also how they're suits. So I'll give you another example. The actual experience, because I head up, well, we have tens of thousands of people now going all over the world doing close encounters of the fifth kind, making contact. No one's ever been bothered by ETs, but we have been bothered by what you're asking about. For example, we were near Joshua Tree once, had this beautiful experience with this seamless craft and these beings that partially materialized around us. I'll show a picture of it tomorrow, of this ambassador from the Andromeda galaxy. And then when we got back to our houses, one of the groups that was on my team were in a house near mine, and they had this program life form climb up on the house and was banging on the windows. And it was like something like not a Chakupa or whatever you call it. It was like one of these crazy things, but it was like right out of Montauk or right out of, but that was a man-made creature meant to scare. And so one of the people in the house had a firearm, chased it off, and it ran off into the desert, and there were a group of SUVs at the base of this desert road far away that apparently it went back to. And that was a man-made program life form that looked, it would fool everyone to be an ET. So the first thing I train people who are on these CE5 contact expeditions to be able to identify the difference. And of course, there's also an invasiveness to it, a frightening aspect to it. None of the ET experiences. So I say, well, the aliens are man-made. The ETs, I said, we need to rename this conference. So get rid of alien. It's a xenophobic word. I hate it. But sorry. But that really, we're talking about, it's really very clear once you understand what to look for. There's also a sort of invasiveness. So if you become frightened, in every case, I can't think of an exception to this, on our teams where we've had a craft or a being get some very close, if someone is afraid, they stop and they back off. Whereas the military ones are going to come right at you, buddy, and they ain't going to back off. So there's an invasiveness to the ones that are man-made. And then there are other characteristics. For example, one of the men who was on a naval ship when we were testing our ICBMs shooting downrange in South Atlantic, the captain came to me with this story of how we shot down this ET craft. And to make a long story short, the reason he called me was that when he retrieved the ejection pod that was seamless, and there were these 4 39-inch tall ETs, and he said they were handsome little men. They look with the skin color of Sicilians. Very politically incorrect, even in a red state, but never mind. And no hair, and everything. I'm quoting, I mean, hey, it's just the truth. And he said, but the reason I'm calling you is that they had this uniform on that was some type of metallicized cloth that was very fine, but there were no buttons and zippers. And he was perplexed for 30 years. How in God's name did they get in and out of them? Because you couldn't. You could not get in and out of this uniform. There was no way to get, none of this. So, and it was tight, and there was no way to get over your head or take it off. I said, they have a electronic system where those items materialize on and off. They would zip, zip. He says, oh, that's it. And then I explained to him what transdimensional interstellar manufacturing consists of. So ironically, a lot of these military guys who approach me have just had one little picture of something, and they come to me because they kind of know that I've been collecting the picture from 1,000 different sources. So in a sense, we've become our own intelligence gathering operation with the Disclosure Project. But that was the main reason he called. And that's another thing to look for, is the clothing, subtle things like that. I mean, you wouldn't think to look for it, but it's very important. Another question.
One more question back here. I think we have time for one more question, okay? Back here.
Yeah, sure. You the boss.
Question I have is, reading about Operation High Jump. Now, Byrd in the end turns around and says, we have to be very careful because there's objects that can fly from pole to pole. You're familiar with this. Is that a flag that's gone up, or is there something behind that that we're not supposed to know? Because Byrd was supposed to be down there in Operation High Jump for 6 to 8 months. After 2 months, they scattered home with the tail between their legs. But there's objects that are flying through the atmosphere from pole to pole.
Well,
Fill me in.
It's been well known that they're one of the places that, for decades now, probably 60 years, there have been covert military UFO-looking bases that are on the poles because they're very well hidden. It's also come to my attention recently from a man who's worked very closely with the United Nations and with the last CIA director, outgoing CIA director Brennan, that is apparently, particularly the southern Antarctica, is where a false flag would be launched from, so that these assets could be put up and get airborne enough. They wouldn't be coming from space, but they would look like they're coming from space, and there's very little detection in these very remote areas on either pole, up north or around the southern pole, and that there are underground facilities there. Now there are other ones, such as the Pine Gap area of Australia, and I have a man who worked there as a physicist, and you know that's a huge underground facility. That's a joint Air Force and NSA operation, and that is where a lot of the program life forms are being manufactured, by the way, is in that area of the central outback of Australia near Pine Gap. And I have interviewed a man who worked in the facility and how it's structured and how it's laid out. And interestingly, with this Air Force intelligence officer, Doty, he describes both the man-made research and development sections of Area 51, but also describes in detail the areas that are dealing with the true ET craft, and the two have no connection to each other. They're very compartmentalized, but he had access to both. So it's a very interesting, that whole interview is amazing. It could have been a whole documentary, but, and you can see it, I mean, it's available. So in closing, I'd like to just thank all of you for coming and for your support for Unacknowledged. I hope to see you tonight. We'll have more Q&A time after the film. We'll have an hour of it. And I want you to just leave with this one thought. Don't look to your governments to fix this. Look to yourselves and your neighbors. Look to what you can do. Because the Disclosure Project, you know, I founded the Global Disclosure Movement after I had exhausted every single possibility going through the government that you and I know about. So I have not a lot of confidence in the governments as they currently exist because they are wholly owned assets of the cabal. I have a great deal of faith in the average man and woman on Earth to learn about this and do the right thing and come together. And if we do that, we can create an entirely new civilization on Earth that will go on for hundreds of thousands of years in peace and abundance. Thank you.